Hello, everybody. I am Matt Kozlov, Managing Director of Techstars LA and previously Managing Director of the Techstars Healthcare Accelerator in partnership with Cedars Sinai. Participants, please mute. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to welcome you all here. We've got an incredible group of panelists moderated by the latest addition to the Techstars management family. We at Techstars are incredibly passionate about healthcare globally, but in the US in particular. We've been running programs focused on healthcare for now over 6 years. Originally with the Techstars Cedars Sinai Accelerator, then the Techstars United Healthcare Accelerator, then the Techstars Longevity Accelerator, and many of our city programs like Techstars LA, Techstars Boston, and others focus fairly heavily on the healthcare sector as well. Many of our most successful companies, such as PillPack, Zipline, and some of the companies here on the phone today, are healthcare companies, and we are committed as an organization to continue backing and supporting and helping grow the next generation of world-class healthcare entrepreneurs. We recognize that healthcare is not like a consumer tech company or a typical B2B SaaS company where you can just put things out in the market and hope things work and talk to your customer and change things. Healthcare is harder, especially if you're dealing with providers or payers, or if you're a medical device company. You're dealing with much different product sprints and customer interactions. And so we build our programs that recognize that and give founders every opportunity they possibly can have to build the best, most successful healthcare company, whether that's access to pilot customers, mentors across every sector of the healthcare industry, and unique hands-on support as companies build and start to raise capital and potentially do FDA submissions. So on the call today, we have amazing founders who went through all of those programs. And we have a fantastic moderator, Kyle Robertson, and I'll let Kyle introduce himself. But Kyle recently joined us as our healthcare entrepreneur in residence, who's working across the entire Techstars family, helping companies grow from seed to Series A and beyond. He's not working with just one program. He really is supporting the entire community. And I think once you hear his journey and his experience with Techstars, you'll understand why, and he will be moderating the rest of the event. So I'm going to hand it over to Kyle. And just before I do so and turn off my own camera and video, I want to let everybody know that applications to the Techstars LA September cohort are open, and we'll be posting a link in the chat. And both Carmine and I will be available to meet with founders who are interested in the program after today. And we are currently in program with 5 amazing healthcare companies in Techstars LA now that just started last week. But that's enough for me. I will now hand it over to Kyle, who will introduce himself and the rest of the panelists.
Thank you very much, Matt. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here with some great panelists today who can tell you a little bit about what it's like to build a healthcare company and how Techstars helped them do that. As Matt mentioned, I'm the moderator. By way of background, I was the founder and CEO of a company called NarrativeDX. NarrativeDX was the market leader in healthcare experience analytics. We used artificial intelligence to understand comments and other feedback left by patients. We grew that company to be in 80% of hospitals in the United States, and we sold it to the market leader, Press Ganey, in March 2020. We were a Techstars Cedars Sinai 2017 company, and the program was vital to changing the trajectory of my company, and I learned so many things. I'm excited to be here tonight with these great panelists. I'm actually going to kick it off with Ben and let him introduce himself. He went through the Techstars Cedars Sinai program with me, and he's a friend of mine, and it's wonderful to see him again. Hey, Ben, please introduce yourself to everybody.
Yeah, thanks. Great to see you, Kyle. Yeah, so kicking it off, as Kyle said, we were part of the Techstars program with Cedars Sinai in 2017. Been a little while. But yeah, originally founded Tasso in about 2012, kicked it off as a nights and weekends project, grew it with some grants. Happy to talk more about that if anyone's interested. But yeah, as Tasso, we bring diagnostics and healthcare to the home. We created a painless blood collection device that we can mail out to patients, have them use the device from home, ship it back into a lab for analysis. And really now we're able to tackle really the things that impact your overall care and your overall healthcare decisions. So a lot of those sort of impacts of pharmaceutical companies in clinical trials and helping payers and healthcare systems be able to access their patients wherever they might be. My original background is a PhD in biomedical engineering, so diagnostics heavy background. And I thought starting a healthcare company would be fun, and largely it has been. So happy to chat about the journey, but happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ben. Sandra, do you want to go next? You're on mute.
Is that better?
There you go.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. My name is Dr. Sandra Saldana, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Alva Health. Alva Health is developing a wearable device for real-time stroke detection for people who are living with high risk of stroke. We did the Techstars Los Angeles program last summer, graduated in October. We have, really grateful to be part of that program. We've definitely accelerated. We are just about to close a pre-seed round, and we'll be opening a seed round soon. And my background originally was also a PhD in cancer biology. Then I spent a few years doing B2B sales in the medtech and pharmaceutical industry. And then after that, after meeting a lot of CEOs and seeing exciting technologies being built, I decided to go back to school and do an MBA so that I could start my own business. So that's how I became involved in entrepreneurship. And I'm happy to be here and happy to share a bit about my experience. I can also talk to the grant funding as well, as that's primarily how we've been supported over the last few years.
Awesome. Thank you. Rima, can you go next, please?
Sure. Thank you, Kyle. So I'm Rima Silova-Olson, co-founder and machine learning scientist at Kintsugi, where we've created a voice biomarker technology that can detect depression and anxiety from short clips of reformed speech. Just like Sandra and Ben, we're also initially grant-funded organization, but we also recently closed our $20 million Series A round led by Insight Partners. And we're helping organizations close mental health care gaps in their workflows. So we just kicked off our pilot with UHC, which is observing really high 87% consent rate from the members. And we are contracting with Trinity Health, integrating into their innovative virtual primary care setting. By way of education, I'm an engineer. So I came to healthcare without much knowledge of how either healthcare worked or without any medical credentials. And it was quite a journey for us to untangle how the field works. It is one of the most complex industries, in our opinion, and we're still on our journey of untangling how different parties are incentivized. My own background, previously I worked at a insanely successful fintech startup. It was powered by machine learning. We IPO'd for $6 billion. And I'm using all the tricks that I've learned there in a field that I care much more about, which is mental health. Really happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Jeff, to you.
All right, thank you. So I'm Jeff Gamble, co-founder and chief technology officer at Rezilient Health, where we offer omni-channel virtual primary care for employers. So anywhere from small 50-person privately owned employers all the way up to 6,000 member local governments. They offer us as a concierge benefit to their employees, who then get access to a Rezilient clinician and can access them through messaging, through video like what we're doing right now, and then at our cloud clinics, which are actual physical clinics, where the doctors are virtually on the screen while you have on-staff members there that are doing labs, imaging, and physical exams on behalf of the doctor in real time. So we did the Techstars Future of Longevity program back in fall 2020. So we were actually one of the first programs that was done fully virtual, which was an interesting experience at the time. Right after we got out of that program, probably within 3 to 6 months, we raised a $2.5 million seed round that was led by Unseen Capital, and Techstars participated in that round as well. I'm an engineer by trade, did my undergrad and my PhD in biomedical engineering. So I've always had, exposure to both technology and healthcare in some respect. And then spent the last 5+ years of my career working very closely with physicians in particular, and really understanding what their clinical workflows look like and how does technology fit within those clinical workflows. And so, yeah, I kind of second everything that everyone mentioned. Healthcare is complex, it's difficult, it's old school, but innovation is badly needed. And small innovation can actually have significant impact on how things are done. And so, if anyone has questions, kind of anywhere from, I've done technology, operations, product, kind of the full gambit here in the healthcare side. So happy to answer any questions there if people have them.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I think the first question I'm going to ask might come right back to you, but I will open it up if other people have an opinion. I wanted to ask a little bit about your experience getting these great innovations into health systems. If you could talk about how that's difficult or not difficult, how you found the experience, and anything you've learned along the way.
Yeah, innovating with health systems is interesting, to say the least. I think one of the things that was a learning curve for me and my team was just kind of understanding the sales cycle. Health systems just kind of inherently, if you look at how decisions are made and kind of the hierarchical nature of those decisions, the sales cycle you can go anywhere from 9 months out to 18 months, just kind of depending on the system that you're working with. You have to make sure that whatever technology you're selling or offering, fits within the appropriate time horizon of strategic objectives that health system has. So although you may know that you're solving a clinical problem, but it just may not be something that is kind of within the top 5 kind of strategic objectives that they have going on right now. So you can definitely be barking up the wrong tree. And so for us, what we found, at least for what we're doing and kind of fully virtualizing primary care, where you are never interacting with your doctor in person, which is just kind of a new weird thing to be selling in the first place. We found it much easier and low friction to sell that to employers, and in particular self-funded employers, because they're carrying the risk. If someone has an ED visit or has a surgery or God forbid dies from a disease, that bill is hitting their bottom line because they are the payer in that situation. So we found that they had a much it was just a deeper problem that needed to be solved more immediately for what we were selling in particular. And I find that a lot of health tech companies end up in that kind of, who do I sell to? It's either the payers, the provider orgs, or eventually the employers. And just depending on what you're selling, you kind of have to pick your poison.
See lots of nodding heads. Rima or Ben, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, it was interesting for us to understand how many parties are involved in the delivering healthcare to the patients. And then when you bring in private insurers, government, the exchanges, the providers, the capitated models, fee-for-service, all of that gets complex, exponentially complex, really fast. And I forgot to mention, but we were part of United Healthcare Accelerator, Techstars, and that is how we ended up with running a pilot with them. And we cannot overstate how big of a difference that program had on our company and our trajectory. We were in that early stage, less than a year old. trying to understand where there's a need, because we're technologists. We created the technology and we needed to find the need for it post factum, which is the opposite of how you're supposed to do things. I think because of that program and having access to mentors during Mentor Madness, we had about 400 calls with executives within 13 weeks of the program. We were able to learn and clarify and hone down our value proposition. And that was the only way for us to get access to people who are trying to innovate within the organizations. As outsiders, me and my co-founder were both engineers. We tried cold calling, we tried LinkedIn outbound, we tried email outbound, trying to understand, get a hold of these executives to learn about their pains and priorities. It was nearly impossible. The conversion rate was abysmal. And just having access to all of the executives listening to us and being willing to help us during the Accelerator Mentor Madness program was a life-changing experience. And since then, we made our first pivot and never looked back.
You know, I'll echo exactly that. The Cedars Sinai program that I went through, I had been trying to get the attention of the executives at Cedars Sinai for years, as many people do, but it wasn't until I actually got a chance through the program to sit down and talk to them face to face that things could really click. I think that's true for a lot of people. And I see Ben nodding. Ben, do you have anything to add to this?
I was going to say, one of my favorite bits on this ever is, did you guys know that the biggest problem in patient satisfaction in hospitals is squeaky wheels, number one, and number two is not having bed sheets. I think that, just to pick on Kyle here a little bit, that just stuck in my head so well, is because at the end of the day, hospitals and health systems you got to do three things, I guess. You got to follow the dollars, figure out where they're getting stuff paid for. And in Kyle's experience, and frankly in ours too, patient satisfaction, this little tiny thing, huge dollars associated with that. People get paid for that in Medicare Advantage. And overall, you know, that's part of how they recruit and retain patients. And so thinking all the way through to the dollars, you know, Jeff pointed out, you know, who manages the care of those patients? How is that care implemented? All of that is so critical as a first step. Number two is then from there, once you identify the dollars in flow, find the pain points. Because without, you know, assuming that you have the right hammer for their nail doesn't take into account that they may not have that as a priority. It may not be a problem. And by listening and figuring out a little bit better where are some implementable solutions, sort of associates those two things. Then the third thing is make sure you have the right champions, you listen to them and get a chance to have a dialogue. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's an iterative experience and it's mostly about learning and trying to figure out how can you take, you know, your solution and try to focus on fixing a specific thing in healthcare, because it is so big and it gets so complex. So that's just a quick takeaway. And yeah, as Tasso too, you know, we have a lot of those, but just doesn't stick in my head as much as squeaky wheels. Sorry, Kyle.
I made a whole career off these squeaky wheels. So glad it stuck in your head and was memorable. Sandra, I was wondering, when you were in the program, I'm going to switch the questions a little bit, but when you were in the program, what were you focused on? Did you have some goals that you were trying to achieve by the end of the program, and what were they?
Yeah, we were really focused on understanding what's the best way to build our business. We have been, you know, a team of co-founders that we've been around for a bit longer than some of the companies that started with Techstars. And, you know, we have this like core team and very specific roles. And like the next phase of our company is going to be growing and bringing in engineers and really expanding our team. And it's kind of a complex, more complex problem that we're solving. Well, not the problem, but the product we're developing has all these pieces to it. So there's hardware, there's software, there's algorithms, there's regulatory, there's all these layers of kind of complexity. And it's like you come into it and you don't know exactly what's most important. You know, who do I hire first? How do I build this engineering team? So that was one of the huge questions that we came into the program with. And, you know, the program really puts you in front of so many people who have experience building companies. No one startup is the same. And so you just need as much exposure to entrepreneurs and people who've been there and done that as possible in the early days when when you're growing. And Techstars was just so great at putting us in touch with people that really know. They've been through it, they've made mistakes, they can tell you what they did right, what they did wrong, and then you kind of adjust the advice to your specific situation. And it's just the speed at which these introductions happen, the conversations, it's so fast. You have a question and then immediately you have multiple people that you can test these questions with and test your assumptions with. And so that I think that was one really key piece for us. Now we're still in the process of building out that team, but I think that coming away from the program, we have a really good idea of what we want our company to look like in the near future, and then as we grow in the next few years.
Awesome. Jeff, same question to you. What were you focused on during the program?
For us, we were definitely focused on kind of who was the appropriate person to be paying for our service. We were a little unique relative to some of the other companies in that we had been around for a couple of years. My co-founder and I, we actually started the company originally as a medical device company, and kind of raised some money from that, pivoted out of that into kind of medical robotics, and then pivoted again into a services organization, which is kind of an interesting trail of pivots, but it's worked out for us. So it was a lot of energy we were actually, probably when we got to Techstars, we were selling to health systems. And by the time we got out of Techstars, we were only selling to employers. And so that definitely helped us to kind of focus our energy just by kind of exposing us to mentors across the healthcare space. And frankly, our MD at the time was like, look, you guys are selling to too many different people, and it's distracting from kind of where you're trying to go. So you got to pick one, you got to pick something. And so, yeah, we really decided, kind of, as I mentioned earlier, that like who was feeling the pain the worst amongst the people we were trying to sell to, and employers, and especially kind of the smaller self-funded ones, stuck out.
Makes a lot of sense. Did anybody else on the panel have a pivot or a learning that they made during the program that they want to share? Not a Ben go. Okay, I'll do.
No, yeah, go ahead. If you have
No,
question, we only got a couple more minutes.
No, okay. Well, mine was we had to figure out the buyers. That was definitely a part of it. The same thing that Jeff dealt with. But for part of us, we looked at comments that were from patients, and one of the things that we realized in program was the experience a patient has actually starts with the caregiver. If the caregiver's having a bad day and a bad experience, that all trickles down. And it became really clear to us we needed to start analyzing doctor and nurse feedback, which was a very scary thing because it was a whole machine learning model we hadn't built out and weren't funded to build out and these other things. But it was really important to do it. And that was one of our big decisions. In addition to actually learning how to sell things, it was figuring out the right place for the product to go, looking at the resources we had available and figuring out what to cut and what to go to get to that right place. But I just remember it being very scary to devote resources to a new thing, but knowing that it was the right path. And I only found that out through sitting down with some people from Cedars Sinai who basically drew a chart, because I was new to healthcare as well. They drew a chart that showed me it starts with the doctor, and then it becomes very clear. But those things I wouldn't have had, and I can honestly say that without the program, I don't think I would have been in an environment where I felt confident in making that big of a change. Just the sort of experimental nature and the support to test and iterate on those things rapidly was really important for me when I was doing that. But that's one of the things for the next question I'll throw out to everybody. What is one thing that I wish I knew going into the program? It's that changing things is okay. It's actually highly encouraged to try to get to the right answer. So that's the question I'd like to ask to the panelists. What, if anything, do you wish you knew when you went into the Techstars program? And Sandra, I'll start with you.
Oh. So I wish I knew how how many resources we were going to get. I mean, they tell you, when you're starting, they're like, there's going to be a lot. You're going to have a lot of information and a lot of connections and a lot of introductions. So I kind of wish I had maybe brought in, a small team of people to help me kind of manage all of the different introductions and just make sure that, we got every single drop of knowledge out of every single person that we met, because there's such like smart people associated with these programs. Like you really learn so much from everyone. And I kind of do wish I had a bit of a bigger team there in person, like at the meetings with me. So that would be, I guess, my biggest change that I would make. But the program was just even with that, we got so much out of it, and we continue to get so much out of the network. So, it's been a great experience.
Yeah, I experienced the same thing. It's hard you get so many things coming at you that are good. We actually brought 3 people out to address that. So that rings true with me. Ben, how about you? What do you wish you knew going into the program?
Yeah, so mine was demo day comes up on you fast. So just get ready to get in program and just get stuff done, because it just comes at you fast. There are lots of meetings. There are lots of good stuff going on. You get out what you put in, and just it all just kind of comes up on you quick.
Awesome. Rima?
I don't know. Overall experience was so positive that I can't say. Oh, okay. One thing we went in with this feeling of kind of, like I said, we had experienced the time frame when we couldn't get access to these executives, and we kind of built up this impression that they're not accessible, they're very busy, and they have nothing to do with some small startups that are trying to do something. They don't care. But when we started having conversations, it was entirely different experience. These executives at healthcare organs at UHC had so much respect for startups. They were willing to take not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings afterwards. They were so excited for us. They were so supportive, and they had they romanticized what startup is, right? They had so much respect for us for putting everything on the side and taking the risk and trying to make a difference in this field and pursuing our passion, that we just walked out of the program with many, many friends. With many of them, we're still very good friends. It's been over a year, and our relationships are still very strong. So I think, the initial intimidation was assuaged on day 2, and we just realized that in healthcare, even in the large organizations, there are a lot of people passionate about bringing innovation, bringing change. It's difficult, it takes time, but if you look at the individual person level, there's a lot of willingness to help and bring innovation into the organization. So once we learned that their attitude towards technologies is extremely positive, it gave us confidence to pursue those deals and projects, even if the sales cycles were incredibly long.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Jeff, any words of wisdom from you that you wish you knew?
So I definitely second the idea that we, start practicing your demo day pitch as early as possible. We definitely waited kind of to the last minute and were able to pull it together, but I wish we had kind of started with that narrative earlier. And then the other big one that was huge for us was being very strategic about how you leverage your mentors. Kind of mentor madness and how all of that functions. We did a pretty good job, but looking back, I think we could have been a little more strategic about who we selected and how we selected them, how we utilized them, and just being okay with the fact that and it's uncomfortable if you're someone that doesn't normally make a lot of asks, but any ask is on the table, and you should put it on the table. because those mentors are there to accelerate you. It's literally the purpose of the program. And so I kind of wish with some mentors we had been more aggressive with the asks that we had made, because even the ones that I thought were kind of, oh, I don't think they're going to do that for us, they like went above and beyond. And so now looking back, I'm like, damn, like what could we have asked for? And they would have made that intro, but we were a little too shy about asking for that at the time.
That's great feedback. If you don't ask for it, it's hard to get it. That's awesome. Well, I want to thank Jeff and Sandra for being on the panel. We are now going to rotate our panelists and bring on 2 new ones who I will allow to introduce themselves. But thank you very much to Jeff and Sandra.
Thank you. Great seeing everyone.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Supposed to bring in 2 new panelists here in 1 second. Sorry for the delay. Hey, Maureen, how are you?
I am doing good. How are you?
Doing great. It's wonderful to see you.
Yeah, you too. This is a panel of familiar faces.
Hi, Scott. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, good evening, everybody. It's funny listening to Jeff about how to manage your mentor, because I've done that, I think, at 3 cohorts at the Cedars Accelerator. I think Tasso and NarrativeDX were ones that came through. My day job is I'm the Chief Information Officer for UCI Health, and also now the Innovation Officer. I've been a CIO in healthcare for like 25 years. I was on our venture capital board at my former organization. Have background in pharmacy. I long ago used to practice, and business degree. I oversaw research. So, I sort of come at it from, as a mentor anyway, in a variety of ways. One, as the CIO, we're often, and I think some of this was implied, a barrier to great ideas, because the last thing I need as a buyer is another application. I had, 300 of them now. We can't even count sometimes. And so we end up with a lot of overlap, and it's kind of like all the subscriptions you have, you lose track of, Netflix, you have this, you have that. And pretty soon, if you're running multi-million-dollar internal IT organization, things can kind of get out of control. So it's very, very disciplined. More importantly, we don't want to confuse our end users. I think we heard a lot about, or at least a bit about workflows and the like. When you think about healthcare IT, and we've largely done with, but the last 15 years or so have been this huge rollout of EHRs. And it really intrudes on workflow. It was paper-based medicine is not good. Paperless medicine is far safer. But nevertheless, there's a big cultural change, and there's so many things that go on with that I could spend a lot of time talking about it. But so I'm sort of on the buyer side. We just launched an innovation fund at UCI Health. And we're going to be working with Techstars. I'm looking at a standpoint, a chance to mentor, but also investor. We represent the University of California, and besides our fund, behind it is UC Investments, which is a huge amount of cash and stuff as a result of all the obligations that the University of California has. But we're looking for, so as a mentor, is to try to help people with all the things you heard about. I'm also coming at it from both customer as well as investor. And from a customer standpoint, it's getting clarity on what problem are you trying to solve? How does it fit with what we have? Does it make any sense? Can we add value? Because often that's really a need to get clarity, and there's some tune-up sometimes that happens along the way. I've had a lot of fun. We spent a whole day talking to the various companies, and then some went off to early blossom as the ones you've heard about now. So I'll stop, but let you ask some questions. But it's probably a long introduction, but that's the value I'm potentially bringing to the table. Besides just being a tad skeptical and jaded by all the history, but at the same time, we invested in several companies that turned out to be winners. So there you go.
Thank you very much, Scott. Maureen, could you tell us a little bit about your background and introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I'm Maureen Klewicki, partner at Cedars Sinai Health Ventures. My background, I've always kind of been on the business of healthcare side of things. So I started out as an IP attorney, and I was working with biotech companies, pharma companies, companies spinning out of research hospitals and universities, and basically answering the question, what happens when our IP when we're bought, sold, or spun out? Moved from there to Techstars and Cedars Sinai. So that was, we all know what that looks like, but pre-seed and seed funding and working with companies at the hospital, then moved over to traditional venture capital at an institutional seed fund here in Los Angeles. It was kind of heading up their health practice, and then moved over to Cedars Sinai to head up what is primarily a Series A fund, although we'll do some Series B and a little bit of kind of mature seed as well.
Awesome. These are both very interesting backgrounds, and I'm sure the folks on the phone are very excited to hear some of these questions that I can ask to you that were brought up before. The one I'm going to start with, we were previously talking about how hard it is to meet the appropriate people at health systems and get their attention. And Scott, I think you mentioned the size of these budgets and the noise must be very difficult to understand good from bad. I'm just curious, in your opinion, what's a good way for innovative companies to try to get on your radar or try to meet a large health system that has lots of things going on? What's a good way to distinguish themselves?
I have to admit, sometimes it's serendipity. You just happen to encounter them somehow. More often than not, well, occasionally it's also a recommendation from a colleague. I'm pretty well connected in the CIO community because I've just done it for a while. And so we hear about what somebody else is doing. In fact, we're looking at a very interesting computer vision company that will do all kinds of cool things. So I heard about that from the CIO at another place. But now also, not from an investment standpoint, we have no end of friction inside healthcare. So we're always looking for things that kind of go into the white space. Epic is a rather large EHR, and from their point of view, they sometimes think they're all things to all people, and we know they're not. They're, especially the EHR has been sort of put in perspective with everything else going on. So I'm looking for things in the white space, but it's hard. I get cold calls. I mean, I don't answer the phone. I just don't answer the phone unless I can't, or I'd be like a service desk. So if you're not on my contacts list, you don't get through. So you get in through a colleague or through Techstars or something like that, and the risk is y'all might miss something. Then I go to the regular, or I have, at least in the distant past, or in the past, gone to the meetings and probably resurrect, whether it's Chime or Vive, HIMSS, wherever it goes, but also local CIOs as well. I'm pretty connected with. So I try to run the radar. We don't need more things to do, but we have a lot of problems to solve. And so we're really keenly interested. And sometimes you just have to persevere. Say, excuse me, really, I need you to look at that. And so it's probably one of the first tests of an entrepreneur is like, can they get through the door? Because my door sometimes is just like locked shut. It's really hard to get around in it. I'm blind to things. So all I can say is try. Everyone here knows who I am now. So you're sure to find a way. Just say, I saw you in this one thing. It's like, I will read that email or whatever it is. But that's how it happens. So there you go.
Value even on the overview calls, get to meet people in the health system. That's awesome. Thank you for that. Maureen, anything to add to that?
No, I think I agree with what's said. I think healthcare is like this big complex industry, but in terms of getting a foot in the door, I think it's like so many other things. It's just hustle and putting yourself kind of in the right rooms and in the right networks. And that can happen, at Cedars, I think of it as we have a few different doorways into the organization in terms of early stage companies working with Cedars Sinai. We do incubation on the biotech side. We have the accelerator. Then we love our partners like Techstars and are always looking at companies that Matt's sending my way. And then the venture fund sort of as a doorway as well. But I think it can happen in a million different ways. And I spend a lot of time just trying to put myself in rooms that entrepreneurs are in. And I just also want to acknowledge that, like, I am trying to put myself in your room, hopefully as much, if not more, than you are trying to reach out to me, because I think like that's a true reflection of the dynamics right now with early stage companies. And people have a lot of opportunity. Great companies and entrepreneurs have a lot of opportunity. And so we want to be of service to them. And so, yeah, it's just kind of the hustle, the outreach, going to the conferences, going to meetups, hopefully on both ends of the table.
Yeah. If I could add just a bit to that, because I think Maureen made a really good point. There is a lot of money out there, and some of it's not so smart. And I think what we'd like to bring to the table, because we feel we have to compete for that. And we're planning to do A round as well, but we could do B, C, and D. I mean, the size of the checks that can be written by University of California is enormous, so follow-on investments make sense. But I think, through the door, we want to make sure people know us, right? And because as a strategic investor, which is what we want to be as both an investor, but we want to be customer, the laboratory becomes important. We're running, in this case, one and soon to have 2 hospitals that's delivering care all day long. And we see virtual care as an enormous frontier, all kinds of problems as well as opportunity. And when we want to find ideas that help us solve that. And so as opposed to just money, we present a laboratory and we'll be a good critic. And I can tell you some of the best folks we've worked with in the past, man, we spend time breaking their system. We find defects. We do this because when it looks great on paper, and then, you have a couple conversations with nurses, you get a real life perspective. So we're trying to be, we're open for business. We want to see good ideas. Techstars and other things and colleagues are a good filter. So it's sort of finding us, plus we're interested in seeing good ideas. It's a matter of differentiation and growth. And in this case, an upside while an ROI with an investment.
I mean, to that point, if I could kind of jump in on that, because I think that's a really interesting sort of topic. But, Scott, I just out of curiosity or maybe as a loaded question, but how many good deals do you see? Because just like you're saying, I feel like a big part of, venture differentiation and really, some of the sort of buy side differentiation is going and sort of figuring out a way to separate wheat from chaff and get good things to kind of cross your desk too as a differentiator. So kind of curious how you approach that.
There are a lot of good ideas. It was almost in the three or so 4 cohorts where I was exposed to, 25 or 30 companies, more than half of them had something really interesting. And then a fraction of those, a good fraction, were relevant to problems we have in the company. And so we're looking for, opportunities to partner with them. So we're new and doing deals on our own. And again, all the diligence to be done at the chief investment officer for the term sheets and all the rest of it for chief investment officer. But it's there's plenty of good ideas. But we're looking again, I think maybe like Maureen, sort of A round, or somebody that's got momentum, 2 or 3 customers, leadership team, problem we understand, and for us, a problem that we think it looks to me like a problem that needs to be solved that's relevant to us, and then ultimately deliver that into the business. We have a limited ability to absorb, great solutions. So I want to be a good gateway there. And what I like about the other 4 medical centers is we have a lot of places to try things out. We're happen to be the smaller of the medical centers. The others are ginormous. But we're all in the end trying to do the same thing. So there's plenty of them. But I think once you drill in, then you can really see, if there's something there. But I think there are lots and lots of ideas. It's almost a matter of picking ones that are relevant with the right team in place that fits, it resonates with our customers, clinicians, physicians, nurses, and otherwise, or for that matter, rev cycle. And then choosing the ones you're going to invest in, or refer it off to a colleague, whether he's at City of Hope or Hogue or whatever. I mean, at some point we may be competing. We are competing, but I think we're in service to healthcare. So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of my take.
Maureen, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if Ben, just hearing your question correctly, is it around what are the different sourcing channels and where do you meet entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it's sort of alluding to the fact that I think as a startup, how do you connect the dots between startup side and venture side? because there are lots of good ideas, but how do you sort of showcase the execution aspects? How do you gain that traction, and how do you understand on the sort of venture side too, that it is about selecting good deals and good companies? It's sort of just, I guess, connecting the dots all the way through.
Yeah. So I feel like on the sourcing side, it's kind of like anything and everything. So obviously, like the accelerator that we run and the incubations that we do are one channel. But again, it's just like being out in market, going to conferences, going to meetups, like putting yourself in hopefully the right rooms with entrepreneurs. I think to the second part, which is around from a startup's perspective, how do you prove those traction points such that you're the one company, that gets selected out of 1,000 that are kind of run through a venture capital fund, whether it's ours or many others out there. It's interesting. Like there's definitely different go-to-markets in healthcare. And it was something that I was picking up on when all the entrepreneurs were discussing it before I jumped on. I think that there's a lot of companies out there that they might start direct to consumer and then they end up selling to payers or selling to employers, or they have this idea like, oh, we're selling to providers, but actually you're partnering with providers and you're getting reimbursed by payers. And so I think that that's one thing that I try to suss out in conversation number one. And just to be really clear about, if a company's pitching me, it might be like, I think that we would be a good partner for you, perhaps as like a virtual front door company, but I have a feeling your payment model might actually be different from the provider pays you. You might be getting reimbursement and whatnot. And so I think that that's kind of the value add that you can get from working with healthcare experts early on. And I think just the venture capital industry as a whole is moving in a few different directions. One is cheap, fast capital. The other is specialization. And I think more and more healthcare companies want to work with healthcare investors so that you can suss this stuff out early and then make those connections that are hard to make, because ultimately, like at providers, I don't think it is meant to be like a high and mighty thing. It's more like, man, this person is spending their day doing surgeries and they have like 2 hours at the beginning and 2 hours at the end. And they're probably really fascinated with startups, but ultimately that's not what kind of their day-to-day job is. And so it's hard to get in front of those people.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a quick question. So, Maureen or Scott, either one of you, how do we at startups, right? We read about different organizations, their problems, and some problems are overall in healthcare. Everyone in healthcare faces them, but to get into the details of what particular problems are in the top 5 strategic priority for a given year, how do we get to that level of understanding to, first of all, hone down and prioritize our outbound outreach, right? So instead of us sending out emails to 6,000 hospitals in the US, kind of narrow it down. But we need to make sure that the organization is ready to make that move. Where do we find that information? Is it public usually?
We don't have the time, for one thing, to go around talking about our problems. We go around and talk about how great we are because we're great. And then behind the greatness is some greatness, and behind it is like a whole lot of woe, whether it's staff burnout, our somewhat weak inability to maintain stickiness with our patients or prospective consumers, how we're going to deal with readmissions, which are on average, not too bad, but in CHF is abysmal. But the last thing I'll say is, we have a huge readmission problem. You come in with CHF, there's an X% chance you'll be readmitted. Oh my goodness, we don't get paid for that, and we use up a bed, and lo and behold, it's not good for you either. We don't talk about that. I don't know if there is any venue where, but I can imagine entrepreneurs are typically chasing white space. There's always stuff left on the margins of Epic or Cerner or anyone else. Again, I'm coming at it from a provider standpoint. Mm-hmm. That, commonly an articulation that you might see in Becker's of all the problems in healthcare, what they are, and then to map that to people who may be trying to solve the problem. I think in some cases, entrepreneurs understand a piece of the white space, and they don't want to tell the world they're trying to, address it, because 5 other people will be chasing the same thing, right? So I don't know really how to really tackle that directly, other than through networking and encounters and other VC firms that we're trying to work with. Go ahead.
So I promised everyone watching, this question was not a plant. Literally, the thing that I am working on in my healthcare entrepreneur in residence role is meeting with potential buyers and building the list to match back to text. So incredibly timely question. Scott's answer is exactly right. It's a really hard thing. And one of the things that we're hoping to provide as valuable intel is that exact information. It's hard to keep it up to date and all these other things, but that's one of the things in my role now, is to try to surface those. So be on the alert. I might reach out to you all after this.
Incredible.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, I think we're at the end of our time. We only have a couple of minutes left. Did anybody else have any other topics they wanted to touch on before we ended today? No? All right. Well, with that, I am going to call it to an end and thank everybody for joining today. There's additional follow-up. Carmine's email is in the chat, but please feel free to reach out with any questions. And thanks to everyone for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.
Thanks, everyone.